Hello, this is Dread from Epic Builds, and in today's video topic, we are going to answer a question I have been getting a lot recently with all of the news coming out. If you know me from my Path of Exile content and don't know, I actually started this channel making Last Epoch content for about 2 years now. Last Epoch is an ARPG that was crowdfunded and now has blossomed into an almost complete game. The question I keep getting is, Dread, the multiplayer patch is coming and I want to play some Last Epoch beforehand so I somewhat understand how the game works before I dive in fully, but I want to cruise through the game without too many issues. What build should I play? Well, this video is going to answer just that. This is the perfect place to find the answer to that question. I have been making builds for Last Epoch for almost 2 years now, and I have thousands of hours of knowledge to share with you guys. These builds I'm going to show you are all choices I have personally played and pushed to all of endgame, and would choose to be my starting build if Last Epoch multiplayer patch was tomorrow. Now, obviously, we have no idea what changes are coming with the multiplayer patch outside of a soft ailment rework, so these might not be the best things to play when the patch comes, but they are definitely some of the best to be playing right now. If you end up finding a build from this video to play, leave a like on the video and comment what is your choice of build to learn Last Epoch with. Let's get into the video, shall we? Alright, so the first build we're going to be talking about is for all of you Necromancer lovers. So recently, about half a year ago, we have found probably one of, if not the best Necromancer build in patch 8.5, and probably in the multiplayer patch if EHG does nothing about it. So essentially, the idea is we're using summon wraiths. They recently received a rework and now are a lot different than they were before the patch. Now, essentially what they do is you have a limit to wraiths now, and they all had their base stats increased. If you didn't know, back in the day, you used to be able to get hundreds and hundreds of wraiths. That wasn't good at all, but it was hilarious to watch. But sadly, EHG decided that we needed to get rid of the fun and actually make wraiths into a viable endgame skill, which is exactly what they did. Now, summon wraiths, if you have a node inside of its tree that allows them to be stationary and it doubles their damage, it makes them into a much better minion. So in Last Epoch, minion AI is what I would call, usable, right? But it turns out if you make it so you nail your minions in place and you don't let them do anything other than attack, their AI becomes significantly better and they essentially become fireball turrets. So essentially what you're doing through Monolith is you plop down a wraith, let it attack an enemy, and bam, 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 they kill stuff, and you move on. And it is by far one of, if not the best boss killers currently, being able to kill Durla in under a minute, being able to do all the other T4 bosses, while also clearing through 400 corruption, which is what you're seeing behind my head. Now, this build is very cheap to get started, but to invest into it, you are going to require something like a Vessel of Strife, or of course, the staff that allows you to gain life on minion hit, but both of those versions will be in the description. This build was first pioneered by Darkwook, a member of the community, a friend of mine, and she put a lot of effort into her version as well, which I'm putting in the description of this video. Now, if you want to play a Necromancer and just completely dominate the game without too much effort, this is the build for you. Alright, so if you're coming to Last Epoch and you don't know, Druid is one of, if not one of the strongest classes currently, because it was one of the most recent reworks. Essentially, all of Druid's transforms got reworked, so now Werebear specifically has a lot more options than it did before. And this is one of those options that spawned out of patch 8.4. This is called DoT Werebear. Essentially what we're doing is we're using entangling roots procced off of our maul to clear. So that little circle that expands, what it will do is will root enemies and then deal damage over time to enemies until, of course, they die. And then we have a single target spell, Maelstrom, that is procced by our War Cry or our Roar, quote unquote, while we're in bear mode, and that does all of our single target damage. As you can tell right now in the background, This is one of Last Epoch's premier endgame bosses currently. This is T4 Jurla, and as you can tell, he's completely face tanking with no problems, and that is because, of course, Werebear. Now, this footage is a little outdated because Ravenous Void was nerfed, but it wouldn't really change this build much at all. It would still be face tanking Jurla like it was nothing. Now, essentially what you're doing is you're strength stacking with a node inside Werebear that gives you 1 adaptive spell damage per point of strength, and that allows you to essentially scale your spell damage to the moon and make it so you can actually deal damage with spells like Maelstrom and of course Entangling Roots. The Monolith clear speed is very smooth because you just move through the Monolith and then you Entangling Roots, hit the whole screen, root it, don't have to deal with it, they all die, you move on. It is one of the most leisurely builds ever. Your boss kills will be leisurely. It may be a tad bit slower than what you're used to, but you'll be able to completely face tank everything and not have to think about anything. So if you want to play a quote-unquote sort of melee build or an attribute stacking build, or if you just want to be a big fucking bear, this is the build for you. All right, for the Paladin build or the Sentinel build that I'm going to recommend is going to be Hammer, Throw, Crit, Paladin. So essentially, this build is one of, if not the cheapest builds on this list, because you can essentially start it as soon as you get Hammer Throw and then bring it all the way to tier 4 Jurla and all the rest of the endgame. Recently, I took this build into a softcore SSF race, it's the Vision Tourneys, and I got second place on it because of the arena system. And I was able to farm T4 Jurla like nothing, and it was great. Essentially, you just start with Hammer Throw, go crit Enra's technique, and it's all buttery smooth from there because it all scales for yourself, right? All of your gear are just like mainly just throwing damage rings. All of it's cheap and easy. The Monolith clear speed is great because as you can tell with the hammers, it's like a full screen AoE. And of course, single target is not bad whatsoever. As you can tell here, here's some of the AoE clear. Essentially, you just throw hammers, everything dies. And if you wanted to play Smite, Hammered In, which is a very popular build in Last Epoch currently, this is definitely the build you should be playing until you get all 4 of your Smite Throw Hammer idols, right? And then after that, you can transition into that build, but I would heavily suggest playing this build until then. I really enjoy this build. This is one of my favorite builds of all time. Just being able to make Hammer Throw actually deal damage is just amazing in itself. Not having to worry about mana because Hammer Throw becomes 0 mana when you have no mana, which is great for us. Essentially, we're playing a build that doesn't have to worry about mana whatsoever. A lot of our skills work on 0 mana. We don't have to worry about it. We can put all of our auras and all of our stuff on autocast. We don't have to deal anything. All we do is turn off our brain and blast. So if you want to turn off your brain, blast, go through the entire end game with a dude that throws fucking hammers at enemies, this is the build for you. So this is actually not my build. This is Jay the Product's Static Orb Sorcerer. So essentially what you're doing is you're using Static Orb for all of your clear, and then you're using Lightning Blast for all of your single target. And it is fully SSF viable and scales right into endgame. The beautiful thing about this is Static Orb is one of, if not one of the best clear skills currently in Last Epoch. It's also one of the main skills that got reworked recently. And essentially you just throw big balls of lightning at enemies. If you've played Path of Exile and you've played with Ball Lightning, this is essentially Ball Lightning, but on steroids. It's one big Ball Lightning and a bunch of small little Ball Lightnings. And of course, Lightning Blast is just simply arc if it managed to deal single target damage. Lightning Blast is one of the contenders of the highest amount of single target damage in the entire game currently. It has been nerfed 5 times, but it's still going strong. Doesn't seem like as though it's ever going to die. So this is definitely a very safe build to be playing right now, as it seems like it's all Lightning Blast is never going to fucking die. So I would heavily suggest this build if you want to play kind of like a sorcerer mage style. After you level through the campaign with Glacier, you can swap to Lightning Blast plus Static Orb, and it will feel absolutely wonderful. My friend Jay, he puts his heart and soul into these builds, and he works his ass off. So I would heavily suggest looking at this build if you want to play something mage related. I'm not that much big of a fan of a sorcerer kind of guy. I'm not really that kind of like magey guy. But if you want a magey build, this is the one for you. All right, Dread, where's the rogue? I want to play a rogue build. Well, my friend, this is for you. This is Shadow Dagger's Umbral Blades Explosion Extravaganza. Yes, that's what I call it. Essentially, what you're doing is you're casting Umbral Blades down, and it will spin for a bit, apply Shadow Daggers, which is an ailment that causes damage to the enemy, and then, of course, they also explode and deal a lot of damage in an AoE. So essentially, what's happening is Shadow Dagger is an ailment that stacks to 4, right? And after those 4 stacks, it will proc and deal crit damage based on your melee damage and your throwing damage at the same time. And it's really enjoyable. It does a lot of damage for very little budget. It was just an absolute blast when I was playing it before. I do need to like revamp it and make it tankier, but this version is definitely the I want damage, this is the damage build. This is the build that will give you all the damage in the world while also not having to worry about too much in terms of clear speed, as the explosions are absolutely ridiculous for clear. So hopefully you guys enjoy big explosions, you like Rogue, this is the build for you. Alright, that's going to be it for the builds in this video, but I have hundreds of builds to choose from that I've been playing since I started playing the game 2 years ago, or at least I think like 4 years ago. Now, not all of these are SSF viable. Some of them are memes. Some of them are really good builds that require certain uniques to play beforehand. But I would heavily suggest looking through my entire catalog and trying to find a build that suits you the best. The ones that I just talked about are just the ones that I would play in an solo start environment with no gear whatsoever, and to essentially just deal with endgame very easily. But all of these builds, like you're seeing scrolling down, these are all the fun stuff. So if you want to see the fun stuff, the wacky stuff, the crazy stuff, this is where it's all at. So I would heavily suggest checking out any of these, as any of them I can put my pedigree on. Now, with all that being said, this has been Dread from Epic Builds. Off to go play some Last Epoch. Bye.